the balcony, and the silence before forever night was quiet. The kind of quiet that only happens when the city has cried enough. Rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving the streets below glistening under soft yellow lights. Keanu sat alone on the balcony of his apartment, a cup of cold tea beside him, untouched. He wasn't waiting for anyone, yet somehow, he felt like he was for years. Fame had made noise around him, flashes, shouts, endless questions. But here, above the world, he could finally hear something real. The sound of wind against glass, the heartbeat of the night, the whisper of memory. She used to sit there too, Alexandra. Her laughter had filled that same space once, breaking the silence in the most beautiful way. She would talk about colors, art, love, and time, how none of them were truly separate. And Keanu, quiet as always, would listen. He loved her words, but what he loved more was how they made him feel like a man who still had a soul. Tonight, he found himself whispering into the dark, as if she could still hear him. "I thought forever meant something else," he said softly. His voice cracked a little, like old wood. He remembered the day she left for Europe to showcase her art. She had hugged him tightly, smiled, and said, "Forever doesn't mean never leaving. It means coming back, even if only in spirit." Those words had haunted him ever since, because sometimes people leave and spirit is all that returns. A gentle knock came from behind. It was his assistant, Emma, holding a small box. "This came for you, Mr. Reeves," she said, her tone soft. He nodded, taking the box carefully. When he opened it, a faint smell of paint filled the air, the same lavender tone Alexandra loved to use. Inside, there was a small canvas, half painted, and a note that said, "Finish it with me, from wherever you are." His eyes welled up. He traced the rough edges of the painting, his fingertips trembling. It wasn't finished, but somehow it felt alive. The image showed a balcony, theirs, with two empty chairs facing the city lights. Something in him shifted. He didn't know what, but the quiet began to feel different, less lonely, more patient. As the night grew colder, Keanu picked up the brush lying beside the window. He hadn't painted since she left. His hand shook at first, but then steadied, guided by something unseen. Each stroke brought memories back, laughter, long walks, shared silences. It was as if time folded, letting him sit beside her once more, even for a breath. And when he finally placed the brush down, dawn was breaking. The first light touched the canvas, making it glow. For the first time in months, Keanu smiled. Not the kind that hid pain, but the kind that remembered love. He looked at the empty chair beside him and whispered, "Thank you for coming back. And maybe, just maybe," she had asterisked the letter she never sent. Next morning, sunlight poured gently through the curtains, brushing across Keanu's face. The air smelled faintly of rain and old paint, and for a moment, it almost felt like she was still there. The canvas he had finished the night before sat quietly by the window, half in light, half in shadow, like the line between what was and what might still be. He sat down with his tea, this time warm, and stared at the painting again. Something about it kept calling to him. He leaned closer and noticed something he hadn't seen before. A folded paper carefully taped behind the wooden frame. His heartbeat quickened. He pulled it out with shaking fingers. It was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, soft, flowing, gentle. Alexandra's. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still alive. "Dear Keanu," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. I know you always say words are less important than actions, but sometimes words are all we have left." He swallowed hard, his eyes scanning each word as if afraid they'd disappear. "You once told me that time heals everything. I smiled and didn't argue, but you were wrong, love. Time doesn't heal, love does. And you have more of it inside you than you think. Don't let silence steal that from you." He paused there, breathing deeply. It felt like her voice was in the room, wrapping around him like a quiet hug. "When I painted this balcony, I wanted it to be our forever place where art meets heart. So promise me something. When you feel lost, when you forget who you are, come back here, not to mourn, but to live. And if you ever meet someone who makes you smile the way you used to make me smile, don't hold back. Life doesn't punish you for loving again. It rewards you for surviving. A tear slid down his cheek. He closed his eyes, letting the ache move through him slowly, like a wave that both hurt and healed. By the time he opened them, the city had come alive outside. He looked down at the people walking, strangers, lovers, dreamers, all chasing pieces of forever in their own way. Emma came back with his schedule, but she stopped when she saw the letter. "That's from her, isn't it?" she asked quietly. He nodded. Double quotes, "She always believed in new beginnings," Emma said softly. "Maybe it's time you do too." Her words lingered long after she left. Keanu folded the letter carefully and placed it inside his jacket pocket. It felt like carrying a heartbeat close to his chest. As evening came again, he returned to the balcony. The two chairs were still there, but tonight, instead of talking to the empty one, he whispered into the open air, "Thank you for letting me go, Alex, and for teaching me how to stay." He closed his eyes. Somewhere between the stars and the city lights, he could almost hear her whisper back, "You were never alone." The stranger with the same ice. Next few days passed in quiet reflection. Keanu spent his mornings painting and his evenings on the balcony. Something about creating again brought him peace. A small light inside a room that had been dark for too long. But peace, he knew, never stayed forever. It always came with something unexpected. One afternoon, while leaving the small art shop near the corner of Melrose Avenue, he noticed a young woman struggling to carry a large canvas through the rain. Instinctively, he hurried forward and offered help. She turned, and for a moment, his heart stopped. She had the same calm eyes as Alexandra, not identical, but carrying that same quiet depth that felt like home. "Thank you," she said breathlessly, her voice soft yet strong. "I didn't expect the rain to turn into a storm this fast." "It always surprises you when you think you're prepared," he replied. Giving her a small, understanding smile, they carried the canvas together to a nearby cafe. Shaking off the rain, the woman laughed as she tried to dry the edges with napkins. "I'm terrible at protecting my art," she said, "but maybe that's what makes it real." He smiled faintly. "Art isn't meant to be safe." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like you've loved and lost something beautiful." Her words hit him quietly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe I have. Or maybe it's still here, just in another form." She extended her hand. "I'm Lena. Keanu," he replied simply. Her eyes widened for a moment, but not in the way most people reacted when they recognized him. Instead, she looked at him like someone who saw the person before the name. They talked for a while, about art, about rain, about how time sometimes feels both cruel and kind. When the storm calmed, she stood and said, "I'm teaching an art therapy class for kids downtown tomorrow. You should come. Sometimes helping others helps you remember who you are." He almost said no. Old habits of isolation whispered against it, but her sincerity disarmed him. "Maybe I will," he said finally. That night, back on the balcony, he thought about her words. Art as healing, kindness as memory. He looked at the painting Alexandra had started, the balcony with two chairs. For the first time, he noticed something new, a faint pencil sketch in the background he hadn't seen before. A third chair, barely outlined, waiting. It felt like a message, maybe even a permission. The next morning, he went to the community center. The children greeted him shyly, eyes wide. Lena smiled when she saw him. "You came." "Yeah," he said quietly, picking up a brush. "I needed to remember how to live again." As laughter filled the room, something inside Keanu began to thaw, slow, gentle, real. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't painting for memory. He was painting for life. Echoes of laughter and unfinished goodbyes. Art class became part of Keanu's routine. He didn't plan it that way, but every Thursday, he found himself walking through the same glass doors of the small community center, holding a box of paints and brushes. The children would run to him, excited and curious, shouting his name not because he was famous, but because he listened. Lena was always there, too. She would hum softly as she guided the kids, her voice blending with the sound of paintbrushes scraping canvas. She had a way of making silence feel safe. Sometimes she'd glance at Keanu and smile, as if she understood the quiet parts of him no one else did. One evening, as they cleaned up after class, she noticed a small scar on his hand. Painting accident, she teased gently. He looked at it for a moment. Motorcycle. A long time ago, she nodded, then said softly, some scars don't fade, but maybe they're not supposed to. He studied her face, sensing there was something behind her calm expression, a sadness she didn't speak of. What about you? He asked. You paint like someone who's lost and found something. She hesitated before answering. My brother. He was an artist. He taught me how to paint. He died last year. Her voice broke slightly. He always said art keeps people alive, even after they're gone. Those words hit him deeper than she could have known. It was like Alexandra was speaking again through another soul. He wanted to comfort her, but all he could do was say, he sounds like someone who knew love. She smiled faintly. He did, and now I try to share that love through these kids. They remind me that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about creating something new. The room grew quiet. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Keanu looked at her and realized that somehow, without trying, she had begun to fill the empty spaces in his life, not by replacing what he'd lost, but by helping him rediscover what he still had. Later that night, back on his balcony, he looked at the unfinished painting again. The third chair was still there, faint, waiting. He finally took a pencil and began to trace its outline, making it real. But just as he finished, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Mr. Reeves? A gentle voice said. This is Dr. Ramirez from the street, Clare Art Institute. I believe you were close to Alexandra Grant. His chest tightened. Yes, he whispered. We found another package addressed to you among her personal things. The voice continued. It seems she wanted you to have it, but it was misplaced. Would you like to come by tomorrow to collect it? Keanu froze. Another message. Another piece of her, reaching through time. After a long pause, he finally said, Yes, I'll be there. He hung up, staring at the dark sky. He didn't know what the package contained, but one thing was certain. Tomorrow would change everything. The package that waited for years. The next morning, the city was wrapped in silver mist, soft and calm like a memory that refused to fade. Keanu arrived at the street, Clare Art Institute, just after sunrise. The building was quiet, the kind of silence that felt sacred. A kind woman at the front desk recognized him immediately, but said nothing, just gave him a warm, knowing smile. She guided him down a narrow hallway filled with Alexandra's art, soft colors, bold lines, love hidden in every brushstroke. Each painting seemed to breathe, as if her spirit had never left. In a small office at the end of the hall, Dr. Ramirez handed him a weathered wooden box. It was tied with a red ribbon, slightly faded, but carefully preserved. A tag hung from it that read, For the day he's ready. His hands trembled as he untied it. Inside lay a notebook, a small silver key, and an envelope with his name written in her handwriting. Keanu. He opened the letter first. If you're holding this, it began. It means you've lived through the storm. I knew you would. You always did. He swallowed hard, blinking back tears as he read on. This key belongs to a small art studio I bought before I left. It's not much, just for walls, sunlight, and quiet. I wanted it to be yours someday, or ours, if fate allowed. I called it the Balcony Studio, because I wanted us to keep painting forever, even if life separated us. His throat tightened as he looked down at the small key glimmering in his hand. The letter continued. If you ever feel like your heart is too heavy to carry, go there. You'll know what to do. Maybe you'll paint again. Maybe you'll just sit in silence. Maybe you'll meet someone who reminds you what it means to live. Whatever happens, promise me you'll keep your heart open. Love isn't meant to be trapped in time. It's meant to travel, to grow. By the time he finished, his tears had fallen on the paper. He didn't wipe them away. They belonged there, part of her words now. Drive, Ramirez said gently. The studio is still under her name. We can transfer it to you whenever you're ready. Keanu nodded slowly, gripping the key. I'll go today, he whispered. The studio was only a few streets away. When he opened the door, dust floated through the sunlight like tiny ghosts. The room was simple, 2 easels, a wooden table, and a window overlooking the same skyline he saw from his balcony. And then he saw it, a half-finished painting covered by a white sheet. He pulled it off carefully. It was the same balcony again, but this time, 3 chairs. One for her, one for him, and one left empty, waiting. His breath caught. A faint knock came behind him. It was Lena. "I followed you," she said softly. "I hope that's okay." He smiled through his tears. "Yeah, it's okay." And in that quiet studio, surrounded by sunlight, he realized maybe forever was never lost. It had just changed shape. When forever finally made sense. Days that followed felt different, like waking from a long sleep. Keanu began spending his mornings in the balcony studio, unlocking the door each day as if opening a new part of himself. The air always carried the same faint scent of lavender and paint, Alexandra's scent, and sometimes it almost felt like she was still there, watching quietly, smiling softly. Lena would visit often. Sometimes she helped him sort old brushes, sometimes they just sat in silence. Silence wasn't empty anymore. It had turned into something sacred. One morning, as sunlight poured through the wide window, she said gently, "I think this place was waiting for you." He looked at her and nodded. Maybe it was waiting for both of us. Double quotes together. They decided to reopen the studio, not as a gallery, but as a small art space for children. The kind of place where broken hearts could learn to create again. They named it Forever in Color. The first day the children arrived, laughter filled every corner. Paint splattered, brushes danced, and the walls slowly came alive with the stories of small hands and big dreams. Keanu watched them, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man missing something. He felt complete, not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally found meaning. One evening, after everyone had left, Lena handed him a new canvas. "Paint something just for you," she said. "Not for memory, not for goodbye. For today." He sat in front of the canvas for a long time. His fingers hesitated before touching the brush. And then, slowly, he began to paint the balcony, the city lights, and 3 chairs beneath a sky filled with soft stars. But this time, all the chairs were filled, one with Alexandra's spirit, one with Lena's warmth, and one with him, smiling at both. When he finished, he stepped back. Tears blurred the lines, but he didn't mind. The painting wasn't about perfection. It was about peace. Lena came beside him and whispered, "What does it mean?" He looked at the canvas, then at her. "It means forever isn't about time," he said quietly. "It's about what stays even after everything changes." She smiled and placed her hand over his. "And some loves never really leave. They just find new ways to stay." They sat together on the balcony outside the studio, just as he once did with Alexandra. The sky burned softly with the glow of sunset. For a long while, neither spoke. There was no need to. The silence between them said everything. As the stars began to appear, Keanu finally whispered, "Thank you, Alex, for letting me live again." The wind stirred gently, brushing against his face like a familiar touch. And in that moment, he knew love had not ended. It had only changed form, flowing from one soul to another, forever unbroken. The night settled around them, calm and kind. The city below kept moving, as it always did, but up there on the balcony, time stood still. 2 souls talking about forever, one last time.